Hello and welcome to IMC Radio and Podcast.
Great to be here.
Today we're going to explore the top news headlines for May 23rd.
Yeah, there's quite a bit happening around the globe.
Definitely. We've gathered reports from various sources to cover the key events.
Okay, sounds good. Where are we starting?
Let's kick off with South Sudan. The situation there is still really worrying.
Absolutely. We're seeing these reports of pretty intense clashes, been ongoing since February, it looks like.
Between the army, the SSPDF, and fighters backing Vice President Machar.
That's right, the SPLA-IO. And the impact on civilians is, well, it's devastating.
The numbers are stark. At least 75 civilians killed.
Yeah, and 78 others injured. Plus thousands, literally thousands, displaced.
It really underlines how fragile that 2018 power-sharing deal is.
It does. The violence is ongoing. We're hearing about indiscriminate aerial attacks, ground offensives.
Hitting civilian areas, that's terrible.
Yes, including even a Doctors Without Borders medical facility in one case. Jonglei State and Upper Nile region seem particularly affected.
And this has led to counterattacks.
It seems so. The SPLA-IO and their allies apparently launched a counteroffensive in Fongat County, which just forces more people from their homes.
So the displacement figure is huge now.
The UN estimated around 125,000 people displaced just since mid-April. It's a massive humanitarian issue.
And on top of the fighting, there are arrests happening.
Yeah, dozens of opposition politicians, people linked to Machar's SPLM-IO, have reportedly been arrested.
Which raises obvious concerns, right? Arbitrary detentions, hate speech.
Exactly. The UN is pushing hard for everyone involved to actually stick to the 2018 peace agreement. Let's hope they listen.
Okay, let's move over to Nigeria, a very different kind of conflict here in the music industry.
Right. The Performing Musicians Association of Nigeria, PMAN, there's a legal case involving the rapper Ruggedman and 3 others.
Allegations of burglary and theft. Something about $130,000.
That's the amount mentioned, yes, from the PMN's secretariat in Lekki. Plus 2 Apple laptops. 2 other people, Sunny Neji and Zaki Aze, are apparently still at large.
So the charges are conspiracy, breaking and entry. Potentially cybercrimes, too.
Seems like the charges might be amended to include that. The whole thing was triggered by a petition from PMN's lawyers representing the national president, Pretty Okafor.
And the alleged incident happened when Okafor was out of the country?
Apparently so, back in August 2024. The petition claims they broke in then.
This seems rooted in some kind of internal power struggle.
It really does. There are allegations that the accused unlawfully suspended Okafor, though PMN's National Executive Council later nullified that and reinstated him.
And they tried to set up their own leadership structure.
That's the claim, convening an illegitimate conference, establishing a parallel leadership. There's also controversy around a consent judgment obtained at the National Industrial Court.
Using an unofficial address, apparently, and Okafor's side says they weren't even served the court papers.
Right, and then there were alleged forced entries into the secretariat more recently. In March, and again just this month, May 8th.
Do they have evidence for this?
The petition apparently includes video and photos, and crucially, confirmation from the Registrar of Trade Unions that Pretty Okafor is, in fact, the recognized PMAN president. It's messy.
Definitely sounds like it. Okay, let's broaden the scope a bit. International trade, specifically counterfeit goods in West Africa.
Yeah, an EU report has pointed fingers at Nigeria's seaports, saying they're key entry points for fakes.
So Nigeria's been flagged by the EU.
As a priority 3 country for intellectual property enforcement, yes. The report says these ports are used to bring in all sorts of counterfeit stuff.
Including fake medical products. That's particularly worrying.
It really is. Also, Nigeria seems to be a transit point for fake electronics coming from China, heading to other West African countries and even the EU.
And Nigeria exports fakes too.
Apparently so. Things like counterfeit leather goods, handbags, clothing, footwear, perfumes, cosmetics.
Does the EU acknowledge any progress being made?
They do commend some local efforts, governmental efforts too, but they highlight these persistent systemic issues.
Like what? What's holding things back?
Things like IP litigation taking forever, lots of red tape with police and customs enforcement, plus maybe limited technical know-how and just general public awareness about IP rights.
And Nigeria hasn't signed up to some key international agreements.
Right. The Madrid Agreement and Protocol for Trademarks, and the Geneva Act of the Hague Agreement for Designs. That probably doesn't help streamline things internationally.
So a clear need for stronger action there. Now, shifting over to the U.S., Harvard University is taking on the Trump administration.
That's right. A lawsuit over a ban preventing the university from enrolling international students.
And Harvard's argument is?
They're saying it's unconstitutional retaliation, basically punishment, because the university didn't comply with certain political demands from the White House.
They claim it violates the First Amendment and will have a, quote, devastating effect.
Yes, on the university itself. And, they say, over 7,000 visa holders. They're trying to get a temporary restraining order against the Department of Homeland Security.
What's the administration side? Why the ban?
Well, DHS accused Harvard of allowing anti-American pro-terrorist agitators to assault Jewish students. And they also alleged coordination with the Chinese Communist Party. Strong words.
This came after a demand for records.
Yeah, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem apparently demanded records of foreign students involved in violence or certain protests. This lawsuit is separate from an earlier one about freezing federal funds, though.
It certainly raises big questions about academic freedom and government influence.
Definitely. And the rights of international students caught in the middle.
Okay, let's turn back to the Middle East, Gaza. The situation remains incredibly grim.
Tragically, yes. The Territorial Civil Defense Agency reports at least 16 people killed in recent Israeli strikes.
Mostly in the center and south.
That's what the reports indicate, yes. Dozens more wounded. And Al-Awda Hospital up in the north reported 3 staff injured by Israeli quadcopter drone bombs.
What does the Israeli military say about these operations?
They state their forces attacked military compounds, weapons storage facilities, and sniper posts, hitting over 75 terror targets.
Has aid started flowing again? There was that long pause.
Some aid did begin trickling in on Monday after more than 2 months, which is vital. But the UN's World Food Program reported 15 of its trucks were looted in southern Gaza, so challenges remain.
And the overall toll just keeps climbing.
Gaza's health ministry says at least 3,673 people killed just since March 18th. That brings the total since the conflict escalated to over 53,800. A staggering number.
Stemming, of course, from the Hamas attack back in October 2023, which resulted in 12,218 deaths in Israel.
A truly devastating cycle.
Sticking with the U.S. for a moment, there's another legal update concerning international students.
Yes, a positive development for them, it seems. A federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from terminating the legal status of international students.
So they can't just kick them out while this court case is happening?
Essentially, yes. The order prevents terminating their status while the case challenging previous terminations is pending.
What was the original issue? Tampering with records.
Yeah, the case involves an alleged attempt to tamper with the SEVIS records. That's the system tracking students, putting them at risk of deportation. Apparently affected around 600 students across more than 90 institutions previously.
And the judge thought the students had a strong case.
Judge White stated they were likely to succeed in their claim that the administration's actions violated federal rulemaking procedures and were, quote, arbitrary.
So, a significant ruling for those students.
Definitely. The judge felt it wasn't just speculation that the administration might try it again without warning.
Okay, let's talk trade again. President Trump and Apple.
Right. He's threatened a 25% import tariff on Apple products. Unless iPhones are manufactured in the U.S.
Yeah.
He put out a warning on Truth Social.
That puts a lot of pressure on Apple, especially as they're trying to move some production out of China already.
Exactly. Trump was pretty explicit, saying he expects iPhones sold stateside to be made stateside, not India or anywhere else.
A 25% tariff would make iPhones much more expensive, presumably.
Oh, significantly, yes. Apple has been shifting some assembly to India, but this is a much bigger demand.
Is it even feasible to make iPhones entirely in the U.S.?
Most analysts seem to think it's not feasible right now, at least not without prices going way, way up for consumers. It's a complex supply chain.
Interesting development to watch. Now, what about Ukraine and Russia, a prisoner swap?
Yes, President Trump announced what he called a major prisoner swap, reportedly involving 1,000 people from each side.
Wow, that's a large number. Was the deal finalized?
It was allegedly agreed at talks in Istanbul last week, but the report suggested the exchange itself was still ongoing at the time.
Both sides hold a lot of POWs, right?
Thousands, yes. Russia is believed to hold a larger number, but exact figures are hard to verify.
And there are concerns about how POWs are treated.
Sadly, yes. Both sides accuse each other of violating the Geneva Convention. The UN has reported prisoners on both sides being subjected to torture and ill treatment. It's grim.
Kyiv also reports many missing persons.
Their commissioner for missing persons mentioned over 60,000 people missing overall, with around 10,000 confirmed in captivity. Sometimes these exchanges include people previously listed as missing, or even presumed dead.
So any exchange is hugely significant for the families involved.
Absolutely. A glimmer of hope in a very dark conflict.
Okay, more trade threats from President Trump, this time aimed at the EU.
That's right. A potential 50% tariff on the European Union, starting June 1st, 2025.
50%? That's huge. Why now?
He expressed frustration, saying negotiations with the EU are going nowhere. This would be a massive jump from the current baseline U.S. levy.
How did the EU respond?
Their spokesperson didn't comment directly on the threat itself, but did note that a call was scheduled between EU and U.S. trade representatives.
Yeah.
So talks are, or were, happening.
And Trump's rationale?
He repeated his view that the EU was, quote, formed for the primary purpose of taking advantage of the United States on trade.
Did this affect the markets?
It did. Wall Street stock futures fell, and Apple's share price took a hit in pre-market trading right after the news broke. Trade tensions always make markets nervous.
Understandably. Let's move to a U.S. sentencing story involving fraud.
Yes, a Nigerian-American man, Henry Ezeonaido, has been sentenced to just over 2 years in federal prison.
For what exactly?
Orchestrating a healthcare fraud scheme worth about $1 million. He submitted fraudulent insurance claims for himself and at least 7 others.
Claiming they received expensive medical treatment overseas.
Exactly. But the claims were backed up by fake documents, medical records, bank statements, even police reports, all fabricated.
Did he plead guilty?
He did, to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud and 6 counts of healthcare fraud itself.
What about restitution? Paying the money back?
He's been ordered to pay over $655,000 in restitution and also forfeit nearly $400,000, identified as criminal proceeds.
Were others involved sentenced too?
4 co-conspirators have received sentences, but theirs were probation rather than prison time.
A significant conviction for healthcare fraud.
Definitely sends a message.
Finally, let's circle back to Sudan. The U.S. has imposed sanctions.
Yes, new sanctions related to a U.S. determination that the Sudanese army used chemical weapons back in 2024.
Chemical weapons, that's a serious charge. What do the sanctions involve?
Restrictions on U.S. exports to Sudan and the suspension of U.S. government lines of credit.
Has the Sudanese government responded?
They've rejected the allegations.
Yep.
But reports do indicate the army deployed chemical weapons, possibly including chlorine gas.
This is within the context of that ongoing devastating war, right?
Exactly. The war started in April 2023 between the Army and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF. It's caused immense suffering and displacement.
And the U.S. had already sanctioned key figures.
Yes. Previously, they sanctioned the Army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the RSF leader, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti. These new sanctions add another layer of pressure.
Aimed at accountability for using chemical weapons.
And pushing for an end to the wider conflict, presumably. It's a complex and tragic situation.
It certainly is. Well, that covers our main headlines for today.
A lot going on, as always.
Thank you for listening to today's top news headlines on IAMC Radio and podcast.